All members of the clergy should report child abuse to criminal and civil authorities.
And they should do it whether it's required by the state or not.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Welcome to today's program. I'm so very glad you've joined us for this important discussion. You've heard the opening statements, but you haven't yet met the members of the panel. So I'd like for them to introduce themselves and tell a little bit about what they do. Let's begin with the gentleman to my right.
My name is Bishop Michael Olson, and I serve as the Bishop of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Fort Worth.
And I'm Tom Plumley. I'm the Senior Minister of First Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas. Our congregation is a part of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ.
Hi, my name is Tony Matthews, and I serve as Senior Pastor at North Garland Baptist Fellowship in Garland, Texas.
My name is Canon John Peterson. I'm an Episcopal priest, canonically resident in the Episcopal Diocese of Washington, D.C.
Hi, I'm Carl Trovall. I'm the Richard J. Dinda Professor of Lutheran Identity and Mission at Concordia University in Austin, Texas, a university affiliated with the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod.
I'm Mel Robeck. I'm Senior Professor of Church History at Ecumenics and a Special Assistant to the President for Ecumenical Relations at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California. I'm also an ordained minister with the Assemblies of God.
Well, thank you, everyone, for being here today. As you can see, we have a really good panel assembled for today's discussion, each one an expert in his own field. We know that you're very busy back home at what you usually do every day. Thank you for taking the time to be here for this important discussion. There are 28 states in the United States that require members of the clergy that they mandatorily report child abuse. That's according to the Children's Bureau, an arm of the Department of Health and Human Services. The laws vary widely from state to state on allowances and exemptions given religious leaders, in particular, whether their confidential conversations are protected. The measures vary because of questions about whether the constitutional privileges that religion has in America extend to clerics' private conversations with parishioners. Recent high-profile child sex abuse cases, including athletes and religious leaders, are making it harder for faith groups who want to limit civil oversight of the matter. Currently, the Commonwealth of Virginia and the District of Columbia are considering legislation that adds clergy to the people who are mandated by law to report child abuse or neglect. Both efforts hit the hot-button intersection of child protection and religious liberty. In both Virginia and the district, some faith groups have had a chance to weigh in with concerns, but most are generally supportive of the new requirements. The Catholic Church, the Church's primary issue is protecting the confidentiality of the confessional. Some Protestant clergy are equally concerned about pastor-parishioner confidentiality. In D.C., Jewish groups are also talking about the need to protect privileged conversations while seeking justice for victims. Today, we're asking our panelists to consider these important questions. First of all, should clergy in all states be required to report child abuse to civil authorities under all circumstances, no exceptions? Second question, if the state does not require reporting of child abuse, should clergy do it anyway to protect the child? And the third question for today is, what policies or guidelines does your faith community adhere to and report with regard to combating child abuse? That is our subject for today. Thank you for tuning in. Let's return now to those who helped us to begin today's program. For that, we go back to Bishop Olson. Welcome to the program. And further thoughts on your opening statement, please.
Yes. The child abuse, sexual misconduct with minors is a threat that affects every aspect of our society, including faith groups, including athletics, youth service organizations. It has affected university academics, athletics, as well as even the House of Representatives. This is a societal problem, and it's important that the church, whatever denomination, be at the forefront of fighting this, especially those of us who have the responsibility of pastor, which means shepherd, after Christ the Good Shepherd, who is neither a hireling nor a wolf. And so that is absolutely important and essential that we report any crimes to criminal authorities. Now, with regard to the seal of the sacrament of confession, this is not as frequent a problem as it can be made to be in the speculative order. Most of these things come to light in our youth organizations and service organizations and staff and oversight with that. But should it arise, the seal has to be absolutely respected as a matter of faith, and a penitent, the person who's confessing, must have impressed upon him his or her responsibility to a firm purpose of amendment, which would involve them going to authorities or even to come to their pastor or another person outside of the sacrament of confession, that it could be reported then. And you could accompany someone as your member of your fold to what's responsible.
All right, thank you very much. And now, Reverend Plumley, you added something to the opening statement that Bishop made. So could you care to expound upon that, please?
Right. There are, as the moderator's opening statement stated, there are some places where that sort of reporting is not mandatory. In the state of Texas, where I live, it is mandatory for anybody, not just for clergy, but for clergy, certainly. And it is my opinion that whether one is in one of those states where it's mandatory or not, we have a special responsibility because of our special calling and because of the special nature of the crime. I've got to confess that I long ago resolved to put a sign in my office, either right up behind, on the wall up behind me where anybody who was talking to me at my desk could see it, or right on the front of the desk or something, put a sign saying, the things that we talk about in here are kept in confidence unless you tell me something about child abuse, and then I am bound to say something about that to the authorities. I don't have that sign, but I really should, and all of us should. Excuse me. This is really close to my heart and a major part of my experience in life, both personally and professionally. And it has to do with, again, with the nature of the crime that puts child abuse and child sexual abuse particularly in a special category. It has to do with the vulnerability of the victim, and even more with the inability of the victim to escape the circumstance in many circumstances. That makes this a special sort of crime that requires us to reach beyond some of the things that we ordinarily do in our regular conversations.
All right, thank you very much. Let's go over to Dr. Matthews. Welcome back to the program today. What is your perspective on this important subject?
Yeah, it's a very important topic, and I so appreciate what Bishop Michael and Reverend Tom said, and I think that's a fascinating idea about having the sign in the office, because as pastors, as we all know, we counsel people. They come to us looking for help and for care, and I think that's a very important thing. Child abuse, the abuse of minors certainly should be reported to the authorities, and with no exceptions. And a previous program, I think we talked about protecting individuals who were falsely accused as well. So when I was researching this, I read that several states require that the report be based on reasonable cause to believe that abuse has occurred, and persons who maliciously transmit false reports are subject to civil liability in most states and criminal liability in some. So that will kind of ease the minds of individuals who feel as though, well, you know, I should not report this because it may not be true or not. So, but we got to protect minors, no exception. And if it comes to our doorsteps, we need to report it.
All right, thank you very much. Let's come over to Canon Peterson. Your thoughts on the subject, please.
Yes, I want to thank Michael in particular for his really insightful and helpful, and for being courageous. I would like to make a comment in relationship to the confessional, because in much of the legislation that's actually being passed by the states, the one thing that is given the exception is the confessional. And I really appreciate how Michael dealt with that and what Michael urges in the confessional. I would like to ask you, though, Michael, a question. What happens in the confessional? The seal of the confessional is the sacrament. But what happens in this, with the seal of the sacrament when you have a person who comes in and who confesses to sexual abuse, and then you tell them, you know, you must report this. This is something that you urge them to do. What do you do in the situation when they refuse to do that?
All right, Bishop Olson?
Well, in which case, I would say you have to question them, are they truly contrite? It's really quite fair, because you bring to the confessional those things for which you're sorrowful, which offend not only God, but also your neighbor. And then it require, in some ways, to the extent possible, restitution that can be done. You know, for theft requires restitution of what's been stolen. Now, obviously, there are limits. I mean, you cannot make restitution for murder. You cannot make restitution for the serious traumas. Only God can somehow reconcile that. And so you just have to be really firm in this, and you know, and then even send them, you know, if they're not sorry for it, you have to say then you're not contrite. Now, sometimes most of the time this would happen behind the screen, so you can't identify anyone anyway, you know. And I think the purpose of the seal is not only to protect the penitent, but more also those who are affected by the sins that are social in nature, adultery, you know, fornication, other things that are, and also, I mean, in this case, you know, sexual misconduct, abuse with a child is, you know, grave as well. And so it's to protect them as well as, and that it's not meant to be sort of an isolated private way of collusion. And I think most of the cases that we've seen, confessional hasn't been involved in this.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you for that clarification and information. Dr. Robeck, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Your thoughts, please.
Yeah, this is always a hard issue. It's an easy issue in a sense because it's an issue that involves children, the innocence. And Jesus has a lot to say about children and the preciousness of children. And the one passage that came to my mind as I was thinking this through was in Matthew 18:6, where Jesus says, you know, the person that comes against this child and causes him to stumble and hurts him, it'd be better if they had a millstone around their neck and thrown into the sea. So he takes this very seriously, I think. And, you know, and I understand the need for confidentiality. I worked with student life for many years. I heard a lot of confessions. There are some I would have liked to have acted on that I couldn't. But I feel like when it comes to sexual sin against a child or physical violence up to and including the death of a child, it absolutely has to be reported. I don't care who you are. And I think the law should support that, and I think that our churches should support that. I have to say that I have had one experience of reporting to county over a potential abuse situation that I had been given, and I really struggled for 2 days before I finally gave in. I prayed about it. I talked with my wife about it. I called some friends very close to me. What would you do, and so forth. And I ended up calling the county and saying, look, I've never done this before. I don't want to hurt this person if it's not true, but this needs to be investigated because it's a life and death issue. And I must have spent over an hour on the phone with the woman from the child welfare agency with the county. The sad part of it was they waited until this person was out of the house because they wanted to know if this person had a gun. I knew that this person did. And then when that person came home, they immediately grabbed him, pulled him out of his car, threw him up against the garage in front of his neighbors, spread eagle, and it turned out that there was nothing to it. So, you know, his reputation in that neighborhood was destroyed, and my relationship with that person is now destroyed. So I think we need to be careful, but we also need to recognize it's critical that action be taken. But I just think the SWAT team was too much.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Robeck. And now to Dr. Trovall. Your perspective on this subject, please.
Well, this is an interesting story only because the flip side is people believing, well, this is a good person. I'm sure this really isn't happening because that's just not how that person is. So that's why I think this mandatory reporting is really good. And you pray that the authorities handle it in a wise way. I'm in Texas also, and so I have the obligation as well to report. In my current context as an academic, I mean, I tell students all the time, I don't have the sign, but I tell them, you know, when you're writing stuff, there's some things I got to report, and these are it. And so I'm not saying you can't write it, but you do need to consider and weigh for yourself the choice that you have, because I'm dealing with adults there. But, I mean, some students have written about past sexual abuse, and that gets to be an issue that we train our faculty to deal with. All members of the clergy should report child abuse to authorities, and I mean, I'm fully supportive of that. I think the protection of the innocent, particularly as you said, Tom, there's no way to escape. The Lutherans do have the seal of the confessional, but I do have to say that in my experience, it's almost virtually never used. So in some ways, practically, it doesn't become an issue. It could, and I know some clergy who would maintain the seal of that confessional, and others who would not, and say the obligation is to the law. So that's.
Thank you. There are many institutions, including the church and many of our higher education institutions that are church-related, that require leaders and volunteers to be screened, trained and screened. How is it with your organizations? Anyone want to volunteer? Just quickly around the table, what does your church do for training and screening? Yes,
we require all clergy to be trained and screened in the area of sexual harassment, and many of our lay leaders.
And how is it with...
exactly the same.
The same, and Dr. Ribbett? All right.
Same.
Run the table, yes.
Diocese of Fort Worth, we have 34,000 adults current in safe environment training, which is updated every 2 years. Background checks are run. That includes extraordinary ministers, choir leaders, choir members. It includes clergy, deacons, religious sisters. It includes teachers, parents of children in schools, coaches.
Pretty much everyone.
Anyone involved in ministry at all, any volunteer.
It sounds very much like my church. In my church, in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, we are associated with verified volunteers. There is also Shield the Vulnerable and other programs that you can be involved in. Mm-hmm. Yes, Reverend.
We've even run into a situation where we've had to change our policy about folks that use our building. We're trying to be real good stewards of our building, and there's no reason for it to sit empty a lot of the week. And so we have multiple churches that are in our building. We have two congregations, plus other building users. And we have moved now to where we need for some of them to show us that they've done background checks as well.
Now, these programs, of course, do not prevent 100% child abuse. However, it does help everyone to become more conscious of the issue, and it also trains people. They can be able to spot when it's about to happen or if someone is grooming someone. And of course, the background checks are great screening devices as well, or opportunities to find out.
And it brings it into the light. This is the sort of thing that likes to hide.
Yes.
All right. And so the more transparent you are, sunlight's the best disinfectant.
Definitely. Thank you. That's all the time we have for this segment of the program. But there is an important announcement we'd like for you to stand by to listen to. We'll be back in just a few moments.
Thank you, Pastor Lutz. We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you, Pastor Lutz, and today's closing statements.
Welcome back. And again, thank you so much for tuning in to today's important program. As you've listened to each of the panelists, you understand the importance as well as the urgency of this particular subject. And they've dealt with it with great sensitivity and I think great insight. We're going to go now to the summations. Let's begin with Bishop Olson.
Child abuse is one of the great threats to family equilibrium, to society, and to the vulnerable in our society. It's the responsibility of the church to be at the forefront of combating this evil with the healing grace of Christ that involves the truth manifested both in mercy and in justice.
Thank you. Now, Dr. Matthews.
I agree with Michael that child abuse is definitely an evil act, and clergy should do all that we can do to put in safeguards in the church. And background checks are great. We need to have those, but know that 90% of people who offend don't have a criminal record. So we have to train people to detect the characteristics of these child predators.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Trovall.
To repeat, child abuse is it's a great sin. It's a great evil. It's harm to society, the individual, the family. And pastors, I appreciated, Michael, when you talked about pastors aren't hirelings or wolves. And to not protect the youngest and most vulnerable, it goes against the obligations of a pastor and a caretaker. And I think pastors are well situated because they are in contact with families. They're in family crisis, so they can be there to be precisely those people who can do tremendous good.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Robeck, your summation, please.
Yes, sexual sin is one of the, I think, the deepest sins that one can have between relationships between human beings. I think Paul talks a bit about that. But it's also the case that when it's committed against a child, it's unconscionable. It's just absolutely not something that should be tolerated in any way, shape, or form. Privileged communication is one thing, but the law is another, and I think the law trumps privileged communication at this particular point.
All right, thank you very much. Now, Ken and Peterson, your summation, please.
Yes, I've certainly appreciated this discussion today, and I certainly have appreciated particularly what Michael has said and helped us understand this. The church has to clean up its act, full stop. We have to clean up our act. And I think that what we've heard Michael say is helping us to understand how the Roman Catholic Church is trying to clean up its act. But it is not just the Roman Catholic Church, it's Protestant churches, it's Orthodox churches, it's mega churches. My land, some of the scandals coming out of mega churches is incredible. So we really have to clean up our act. And I think the one way we can help to clean up our act is that we pass legislation in our respective states not to allow this to continue to happen. And Massachusetts, you know, they in 2002, they passed a very strong act, but they exempted the confessional. And I think that we have to have things written into the law that will give the comma parentheses in relationship to that behavior.
All right, thank you very much. Now, Reverend Plumley.
Thank you. I want to voice two warnings, and the first is to clergy out there. You are in a position of authority that requires you to care for everybody that is within your purview, and the special nature, the special circumstance that child abuse does not make it. It moves it from being something where privileged communication should hold sway into a totally different category. Warning number two is for any of you that are thinking you can hang around a church and engage in predatory behavior. Churches are waking up to the realities, and as John said, cleaning up our act. We are becoming more educated on what we need to do. We're thinking about it more. We're giving it more time. We're learning to talk about sex occasionally, and that is a major step in churches learning to clean up their acts. So be careful around churches if you're an abuser.
Thank you, Reverend Plumley. And to everyone, thank you. This is something on which everyone has agreed around this table. It doesn't surprise me because this kind of strikes at the heart. It's a very emotional subject. It's near and dear to us. We who work in churches, we have to experience and deal with these things, sometimes too frequently. And so I'm very glad that we've had this conversation, that you've been able to come and express your opinions and your points of view, and it's very refreshing and encouraging to hear your concern. And I hope that extends to all clergy, to all leaders, to those who are in positions of leadership where there are young people, and do something about it, as has been suggested. I would encourage you to speak with your pastor, with your church leaders. And as you heard, nearly half of our states do not have mandatory requirement to report child abuse. Well, thank you so much, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. Until next time, the charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And now, friends, until next week at the same time and over this very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.